Hi, welcome back to another Terranscapes video. Been away a little bit. I hope you weren't worried about my absence. I know sometimes in the past people have been like, what happened? But spring brings a lot of distractions for me, and I'm going to show a little bit of that distractions at the end of this video, but this update, see how it feels like a maelstrom, is actually going to be a two-parter. So the second part is going to talk about the test cuts that I've received, as well as how I designed those test cuts and what I learned from them. So that's going to be in part two. But in this video, we're going to take a look at how I've been laying out the structures, as though there are many of them, the building, and fitting together all the elements and what I've been tweaking to get that to look correct and better, hopefully. We'll see. And I actually had to go back and re-watch my previous video to see what it was I told you guys about last. So I got that all squared away. I think I understand where I left off and where to go today. And part of the delay also was that I was waiting for some of those test cuts to arrive. So they've come in, so ready to talk about them. So I think that's all I need for an intro. As usual, plenty to talk about. So let's jump over to the computer and I'll show you some of the things I've been working on. So here you see some of the newest work done on the buildings and some top-down views. I'm going to go over all of these bits here. One thing to mention though is all of this work was done before I got into the test cuts and got those back and learned how to design those a little bit more accurately. So there are definitely elements that are going to change somewhat in some of these parts, but the general layout of this building will remain the same. One thing I noticed in doing my looky look and trying to get my scale more accurate is that my little elf here wasn't accurate. So I actually went in and fixed his scale, changed just a little bit. And one of the nice things is Charlie, who's the gentleman who I'm working on with for the laser cutting, he sent me a copy, a miniature that is this miniature from Lord of the Rings. So I actually have an actual mini of this guy to use when I do cuts, and I can put him up against it and see how things look. That was awesome, and I'm super grateful to him. He's been great all the way through this, and I just wanted to give him a big thanks. So before I dive in more detail, I noticed I skimmed the comments from the last video. I haven't replied to them, but I'm going to. But one person made a great suggestion about the columns. And he was inquiring why I was having them, be sort of like Roman, styled with foundations and whatnot. I forget what those are called. These are really just placeholders. I hadn't really made any decisions on them. I just threw them in just to hold the spot. And he mentioned maybe using some kind of a tree motif for them. And I thought, ooh, a lot of possibilities there. So all of the columns that you see are just placeholders at the moment, and they will get some detail added to them down the road. But fantastic suggestion. Really liked it. Something I'm going to definitely be thinking about. A couple quick comments on some changes as well. You'll notice here that I've omitted the roof turret. I took it out, and I don't know if it's going to go back in. I don't think so, because I changed some size of the dormers and whatnot. So that has been removed. It will likely show up in some form in another building down the road. The size of the building has stayed pretty much the same. Still working at about 8 inches tall, but it did get just a hair narrower. And I have moved to millimeters for all of my scaling now, because I'm working in millimeters for the laser cut designing, and so basically I'm working in tenths of a millimeter now. Nothing like extra precision, and I'll talk about that more in that video and why. But so everything's been switched over to metric. Yay, metric is so much more awesome. But that explains some of that. And when I switched it over, I think I didn't fix the heights of these. So these stories are actually a little too short now. So I need to go back in and lift everything up, and that's pretty easy work actually. So, but if it feels a little compressed when you look at my little guy here, that is partly the reason. I think when I switched over to millimeters, I didn't adjust something. I don't know. Anyway, that's why. So let's talk about some details here. Let's, here we go. Let's come into this one here. As I mentioned in my previous video, I was having some struggle tiling the railings across the width of the building and make that look right, make it, you know, just whatever, match up correctly. And what I learned actually is that this railing, balcony, arch, you know, rail system, this actually is commanding the dimensions of the entire building. I know that sounds kind of weird, but in order to have the railing fit the building properly, I have to adjust the building to it, since these have a rigid dimensions. I did push them out a little bit in width, and so this has been stretched a little bit to join that. But this is going to actually get changed as well, since I got a little squished when I converted over to this. So when I lift this story up, I'm going to bring this up a little bit as well. And based on my test cuts, well, originally I was thinking about moving to brass etch for these sections of the railing, and the precision I've been getting, you know, on my sort of first, I understand it, run of test cuts, I'm getting some details small enough that I might just modify this and have them cut by laser. I still got to think about that a little bit more, but it would eliminate one more step. You know, now I got to find brass etch, and then I got to fold it properly, you know, and make it double thick or whatever. And if I could keep things simpler than what I'm doing already, that might be helpful. So that is still an item that is under debate at the moment. So in mentioning the railings and how they control the dimensions of the actual building itself, of course, you know, tiling them in some number where they match evenly affects that. And also how they meet the building. And by that, I mean whether this post is here or not. And I actually struggled to try to figure out what was going on for a while, because when I ran a post from here to here, and I was just sort of toying with it to see if it all lined up properly, when I put the post here, it doesn't actually meet the building. It actually meets the corner of the building right here. And I was pretty stunned by that and felt like I had messed something up, and I looked again and redid it and checked it all. And it occurred to me that the issue is that this post is supposed to be flush with this line, and this post is supposed to be flush with this line, and that's the way it looks down here. And that was a bit of a revelation. And if we take a look at some photos of actual buildings, if we take a look at some porches, I went out and I did a little looky-look for decorative porches just to see what people were doing for rails and for posts and whatnot. One of the things I noticed, and this is the only photo I have of this type of an example, if you look here on the side here, right, whoop, there we go, there's no post against the wall. And that is noteworthy in the sense that the other photos I have show that post against the wall here, and you can see that here. And the next one, we can see that there is a post against the wall here and here. And here we see another, right? This is, I think, an important finishing element because it frames the side of the porch properly. And this width here has to be the same as this width here if you're going to use the same elements. So the porch actually becomes a fixed width depending on the spacing between the individual posts along the rail. That was a surprise to me as well. So when I say that this
design is controlling a lot of the building design. This is why. This is a pattern that controls the width of the balcony. It's all tied together, and you know, unless you're going to have the wall extend beyond it, which is of course perfectly fine, it's controlling it in some way or another. In essence, right, this half post is ending here, and so the wall itself is coming up to meet this line as opposed. Anyway, I'm going to blather on about it, but just trust me that it became, at least in my mind, a more important factor for the layout of the building than I originally expected. While I'm on this photo, I just want to point this out right here. I didn't even notice it when I was setting up this video. This is an element I'm trying to incorporate into my building. I'll show you in a second. What is this called? What is that? I don't know. If anybody knows, throw it in the comments. This type of a bump out, that's something, and I don't know what that is. Anyway, so I think that's it for these. And so coming back to the original, right, you know, if in this case, I've shown it as a full post, right, but I could go to a half post, but I want to keep it full because from this view, you're going to see a full post facing here, and that way it will match, right? So this entire balcony is controlled actually by from here to here, which is interesting. And just before I leave the railing discussion, a couple things, one just occurred to me actually today, is I'm going to need to put a little handrail, you know, topper to this that kind of sticks out a little bit, right, to give a top to this rail piece. So that has to be added. And when I was thinking about having these cut and then making molds and then casting them all, and being particularly concerned with some of these thin areas, these are pretty narrow, and that might be very fragile for demolding. You know, Charlie actually suggested this, and I think in hindsight it's not a bad idea, is to have a lot of the elements just cut out in mass, and then I don't have to worry about replicating them. There will be some things that will have to be cast if they're round, for instance, depending on, say, how these pillars come out, right? If this is going to be a round tree trunk with branches along the wall or something, then that will be something that I have to mold and cast. But where I can just, you know, cut out bits, I need 100 of these, just line them up and cut them, that might be the way to go. Save me a little bit of time, actually, a lot of bit of time, and whatever cost associated with that is probably worth it for me to do. So anyway, some thoughts on how these things might be replicated. Some other changes. One is that I put a small roof trim over the first floor. I thought that would add a nice attractive look to it and help tie the roof down into the second, you know, layer. And then when you're standing here, right, you're looking down on it. And as you approach also, right, then you have this little rain shield when you're opening the door and looking out. So that got added. And here you can see on the second story, this, I'm calling it a bump out. That's a terrible name for it. I don't know what this kind of an extension is, but I wanted to add in one of those with the goal really of breaking up this very box-like form, right? If all the layers levels are the same and they're all square, and it's just not very interesting. So I wanted to add in something like that. And if you look at it from the head-on view, if you will, this will have the same porch railing that we see here, so it'll tie that in, and then the wall will actually be recessed a little bit behind that railing, and then the window will be put into there and recessed as well. And then the roof of that extension will mirror the roof of the dormer as well as the shape of the main roof. So kind of tie that all together. I think that adds a lot to it. There will be some support brackets that will be added to this, similar in the way that these support brackets have been added to this roof line as we walk down it. Still, I stopped in the middle of doing a whole bunch of stuff, so you're seeing some work in progress for sure in some of these drawings. Now, before I talk about the last piece, which is really this tower here, I just want to talk about working in the top-down format here. This has been really instructional. Of course, this has helped me figure out what was going wrong with my railings. and also, you know, figuring out how the dormers might look and trying to, let's see if I think they're both in frame here. Trying to match this shape and where it's entering the roof, and then try to capture that shape from a top view. A little tricky. I think I got it pretty close, but I won't really know exactly what it's going to be until I think I make a 3D mock-up of it. The nice thing is that this doesn't need to be, you know, cut or measured super accurately, because it only needs to support the shingling that will go on it, so it can have, you know, it's something I can trim and fit as needed, just to be able to get a nice tight join with the roof behind, and of course in the front here. And here you can see this is not extended quite yet to this building, but you can see here, in fact, this would look, wait a minute. Yeah, it's gonna not let me line up things. All right, hold on. Let's see here. It would look something like, all right, close enough. It's not right, but you can see here. So the roof line of the extension, again, what is this called? Right, so that roof meets the lower section of this roof, so we're going to have this kind of a shape to it from an aerial view. Let's see here, looking at my notes. All right, and last but certainly not least is the rather radical restructuring of the tower. So here's my original tower, sort of thinking some sort of traditional castle-like shape. And of course, it's not tying in well visually with the rest of the buildings. And I also realized that I have a real crunch here for fitting in minis. So here is a well, now for goodness sakes, oh wait a minute, where's my happy guy? Here, you come over here. All right. So placing the mini in there, right? This is actually, that's a pretty tight spacing. It looks maybe like there's, you know, a bit, but, you know, we're talking about, you know, maybe 1/8 of an inch or a 1/4 inch or something. That's not a lot of space, and it certainly isn't enough space to allow for miniatures to really move around, you know, around each other, for instance, something like that. And I decided to take a different approach entirely and try to tie it in aesthetically to the building itself by, for instance, matching the roofline structure. B, expand the width of the platform and allow the roof to carry over it, and then I can use my railing again here, right? See, trying to tie everything all together into this building. And then modify the center column to allow more miniature access on the tower. And so let's see here. Wait a minute. I've got some other examples. So I'll tell you what, we'll just take this up here for a second. Okay. So here you can see some of my original design ideas when I was trying to figure out how much space is there, right? So here, you know, it's the column, the whole tower is a little smaller in terms, this is top view, right? So its dimensions are smaller, which maybe visually fits a little bit better with the size of this column, but that is very, very tight spacing for a 25mm base, which is the Lord of the Ring base sizes for infantry. And here I expanded the overall dimensions for both the post and the walkway, trying to think about making it, you know, again, keeping it sort of proportional. But again, you know, I gained a little space, but not much. That still feels really tight for me. So I decided to take this and then really reduce the post and give it a much lighter feel, which is maybe a little more elfy, and then be able to have a lot more space within the tower to allow miniatures to be placed in and moved around without, you know, risk of crunch time. So now when you see when I put them in here, for Pete's sakes, auto aligning stuff, there we go. And we'll put them back just for, there we go. So, you know, here now it actually looks reasonable. This man can breathe in this space and not feel crushed or he's going to get pushed out of the balcony by the back wall. So that makes the center post a little bit narrow, but I think it works, and I'm feeling pretty good about it. Now, its exact placement against the building is still a little bit to be determined. I'm expecting it to be something like this with the post. I'd like it against the corner just for, you know, cohesion and, you know, implies a little structural support. And that is going to somewhat be affected by its height and its join to the roof line, as I have not done this yet, but right, this is going to this post is, say, right about there, right? How far are we going to cut into the roof, and how does that join look? And so that's something I still have to work out, but I feel really good about this resizing and making it seem a lot more accessible for miniatures, you know, during gameplay. So that's a pretty big overview of how things are going. There's supposed to be a balcony here that you can see that has not been finished, and I think this balcony may in some way resemble my little extension here, and I think I'd like to keep it open air, but perhaps it'll have some kind of a foundation and sidewalls matching that. Maybe not. I don't know. I'm going to play with that for a little bit. A thing that was interesting to me, and I felt a little bit concerned about, maybe, it still doesn't look quite right to me, is these dormers from this view just feel kind of, I don't know, their proportion seems off, maybe. It's a little hard for me to put my finger on it. Sometimes I just know something doesn't look right, and I'm not sure why. So I'm not entirely sure. Originally, I wanted them to come up, and I thought I'd have them come straight across the top so that the top would be across. And that didn't look right, so I've dropped them down, and then I you know, shrunk them widthwise a little bit. And from this view, I think that looks great. I like it. So it's a little bit odd, and of course, most of the time you're viewing this building, it's going to be from, you know, an angle that's just off of straight on like this. And once they're put in, they're going to have a three-dimensional effect that is not well captured in this kind of a drawing. So I'm not terribly worried about it, but it is something that I've just been going, a lot of on it. All right, so this is a video within the video. It suddenly occurred to me while I was editing that A, I know why this looks wrong now, and B, I know at least conceptually what I need to change. And it's an interesting note because a lot of times during video editing, I see things that I didn't see when I was shooting it. So the problem is that first of all, the symmetry is wrong because it's creating an awkward line of sight. So when you look here, right, and here, this is nice because one is set back, one is set forward, and it creates this interesting where, you know, we have parallel lines, but they're not symmetrically set or vertically set exactly the same. So that's the problem here, and what I need to do is take this dormer and pull it down on the roof, right? And if it came off lower, right, then it would be somewhere in between these two, and that would balance it quite a bit. It'd be potentially helpful if it was also slightly different size than this, and I'm gonna have to think about that because of course I don't want to make it, you know, so this is like, I don't know what this is, it's almost like an attic, but you know, I don't want to make it oh, for God's sakes, hold on, can I bring him to the front? Hold on, all right, and there we go. You know, my thought was, you know, it'd be nice to stand in the dormer and be able to look out, right, and have more space in this. But somehow I need to change that. I don't know, maybe pushing this up a little bit and then stretching it, you know, like that. And of course, that doesn't look right. But you get the idea. I need to somehow change this, you know, just for, that doesn't look right either. Ooh. I don't know about that. Maybe if I were to bring it in, I don't know. Okay, look, this part is not about me doing the design. This part is about me showing you what's wrong and what I need to do to fix it. So that is, I think, what's my problem here, and that's the target area I'll need to work on. So as a very last thought here, I just want to say that doing this is time consuming. And eventually, right, the goal is to be able to say, I want this piece, I hope I'm not in a frame there, I want this piece on a different building, right? So I've got all the parts of that ready to go. It's all assembled. I can just stick it on another drawing. Or I want this arch, balcony railing, or, take this fence for an open, walkway, right? All these little bits will get begged, borrowed, and stealed? Oh, geez. Stolen for other buildings. So once I have, a few elements put down, it should speed up. That's my goal. But I do want to have all of the buildings laid out with a top-down view. Once I put all of this together, right, I've got my, see, that's interesting. Oh, okay, this is the second story little roof line here. I haven't actually done that until just this second, because I've been sort of putting them together layer by layer, working my way up, and then of course towards the end, then I'll be putting on this and such. But this will give me the exact footprint and shape and protrusions from every building. And when I go to lay out the town, I'll be able to precisely fit all of the buildings into the town, into the roads, without any surprises about, it overhanging a modular board union or anything like that. So I feel really, really good about this process, and at this point, it's really a matter of fine-tuning this initial building's layout, which is very close at this point, and then now that I understand the cutting of the elements much better now, you'll see that in the second video on this, that I'm in a position to really start moving forward. So it's been a little work getting here, I won't kid you, but I think the reward of it has been worth the journey. So that gives you a look at the building design as it has been underway at this point. And let's wrap it up at the bench, or the stool, I guess, not that kind of stool, and we can talk about the next video as well.
So that gives you a look at the work that has been done. And before I go, I wanted to make a quick mention that I have done some updating on my Patreon page. I have added 2 new monthly columns. One is on creating switchbacks for hills, constant challenge I've struggled with. And the other is all of the advice I've ever given to anybody who's a budding artist who's contacted me and asked, how do I price things, or how did I start, or what are some things I need to think about if I want to start a terrain studio or some other aspect? I get those questions every couple months, and what I've done is I've cobbled together all of those different questions into one post, as well as added in a whole bunch of things that people haven't asked me about that I think they should be thinking about. And that'll be a resource for me next time I get asked that question. And hopefully, if you fall into that category of how do you do this, or whatever, you should go take a look at it. It's the only post I've ever created that has a table of contents. So it's a biggie. It took me a while to write, but hopefully somewhere in there, some of that table of contents, you'll see something and say, oh. And if you read it and you don't see anything that was helpful, don't tell me, because I spent too much time on it, and the thought that I wasn't able to help somebody a little bit with it would be disheartening. Disheartening? Disheartening. Spell check. I need spell check of the mind. So I also said, though, that before I leave, I would show you a little bit about what has been distracting me in the spring. And this happens every year, and this year's been a little bit more intense than normal. When I was a teacher and we first bought the house, there were a lot of ornamental beds in the yard, and I built upon those and added in more things and put in a pond, which you're seeing right now. And over the past several years, I've left things to kind of go into decline. There's a whole bunch of reasons why, and I won't get into those, but this year I decided to recapture the yard and bring it back to some of its former glory, if I can use such a braggadocio word. Somebody's going to correct me on that. So I've been digging up all the plants and all the beds, rearranging everything, replanting everything. Basically, it's like a complete rebuild of the yard. And, you know, some things I've redone some of the pond, and you can see we have a lot of frogs that love the pond. We get almost every species of Massachusetts coming to visit our pond. You know, it's something that I really enjoy, but it's taking a tremendous amount of time, so I'm really struggling to balance that and work, and I'm doing some miniatures work I'll tell you about in another video or two down the road. So, wow. I do this to myself, though. I constantly overload myself, so there's nobody to blame but me, but I am working very hard to try to wrap up the outside world so I can be a little bit more focused. Things distract me. They play in the back of my mind, and it's hard for me to just let them go until I'm done with them. So I'm just juggling a bunch of things. So if I'm absent, or it takes me a little while to get to your email, or you know, I'm more behind on comments than normal, you know, these are some of the reasons why. And it'll probably run for a couple more weeks, and then I'll have it all set. Hopefully. Then there's the croquet court. So, I had something else I wanted to mention, though. Oh, and so that's partly why you'll notice here that I've removed the Q&A and the rapid fire critique links from that. There's no way I'm going to be able to get to those in the near future, and I would love to revisit them. I love doing them, but I have limits, and so I'm going to set that aside for now, and someday, maybe in the fall, we'll get back to that. But stay tuned for part 2 of this video, where we will go in depth into my understanding of how the laser cutter works, which is really important to me, how I designed things to take that into account, and what the resulting test cuts I got back told me. And overall, I think it was a lot of good news for a lot of hard work. So hopefully you will come back to see that video, because you know that I will be back soon-ish with another Terranscapes video.